Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted to be joining the Aurora Borealis of creation from comics creator Mike Freiheit. Mike, thank you for jumping in, joining, and taking some time to talk with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
A pleasure, a pleasure. I'll mention a couple of your books at the top of the episode here. One of those being Monkey Chef, really interesting use of comics and autobiographical storytelling. And then there's also The Woods, which is horror, and there's some reality that's mixed in there too, a good bit of reality. So excited to talk about those works and any others that you'd like to mention as we go through.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, yeah. What initially connected you with comics and art?
Well, I mean, I grew up reading comics since I was a young kid, and honestly never really thought I would make them because I was more of like a painter and illustrator and stuff growing up. I went to art school for illustration and actually didn't make my first comic until college. And then once I sort of did that, I was like, oh yeah, this feels really good.
Hmm.
Why haven't I been like trying this? Because, I've been a fan of comics and kind of studying them or collecting and studying them for years. So yeah, I mean, I had a really great teacher in college, Nick Bertozzi, who's a great comics artist and creator. And yeah, he just really inspired me. And I ended up doing like a short story based on a Haruki Murakami short story. And
Nice.
um, yeah, it just really got me into it. And then ever since then, just been trying to make as many as possible and, kind of refine and go from there. Yeah,
Cool,
I
cool.
hope that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah. Love a good Haruki Murakami story as well. I'm reading his latest book, the preview for it, so really
Oh,
excited for
nice.
that. But love that sort of blending of reality, and that makes total sense for some of the work that you do. And I also mentioned you gave a shout out to an educator, and I'm an educator, so I believe you also teach comics. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not teaching right now, but I teach at School of the Art Institute sometimes. I'm kind of taking a break right now.
Nice.
Right now, I'm doing like full-time academic advising. But yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I dabble, been teaching for a little while. Yeah,
And academic advising is its own sort of teaching as well.
it
It
is.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how's teaching sort of informed the work and allowed you to explore and challenge yourself?
Oh man, so teaching is interesting because I feel like it's really strengthened my work and also just my vocabulary because I feel like and just notions and ideas, concepts, all of that stuff because you really have to analyze sort of what you know and how to
Hmm.
show it, right? And that's comics, good comics, it's all about sort of like showing instead of telling most of the time. But
Yeah.
so, I really emphasize that in my classes where it's like you got to show something, you got to make sure it's clear, you got to make sure all of that. So, I mean, lessons and everything for me, I think that's been the main challenge is like, how do I take all this stuff that's kind of just notions and I don't even, usually speak aloud, and how do I convert those into things that make sense for other people? Because there's a lot of shared language when it comes to comics and cartooning, but there's also like everyone's got their own weird way of doing it, and
Hmm.
I'm certainly no exception to that. So, um, yeah, I think that was really figuring out how to clearly, illustrate or teach something about doing something clearly. That kind of informs my work, and that I really had to think about, oh yeah, what do I know? How do I tell a story? How do I frame this shot? How do I show this one thing? How many multiple ways can you show one thing to have it have the effect that you want? Um, and I feel like, yeah, it's only just made my sort of foundation of storytelling a lot stronger by having to like explain
Hmm.
name these concepts. Also, just looking over work over and over and over again with students and being like, oh yeah, this is like the analyzation, the critique, all of that stuff. Um, yeah, it all kind of reflects your own work after a while because you are thinking about this stuff all the time. Um, and just how to like not only make your students work better, how to like convey an idea to them, but also, what does this mean for your own work? What does this mean for like maybe I'll do something different this way, or maybe I
Mhm.
learned something from the students too, where I'm like, oh, cool, and it's like I want to use that now. So yeah, it's really been it's pretty incredible to have to take all that stuff out of your head, put it somewhere for someone else to understand, which is what comics are anyway.
Yeah.
Hopefully, good ones. Um, and yeah, make it all make sense.
Love that. Yeah, yeah. Uh, Now, a lot of folks, if you say the word comics, they think of something like Batman or Spider-Man. And I'm a fan of both of those, but I
Sure.
love the way you use the form, you use the medium to kind of explore different types of stories. So, anything that you'd like to say about some of those inspirations and processes for bringing that about?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every project um, I try and do something a little bit different, just depending on what the story is. I mean, I've done a lot of autobiographical stuff. I mean, Monkey Chef is autobiographical. Woods has autobiographical elements in it. Um, and even just like art wise, they're both pretty different. Um, and my third book, I is like autobio mixed with like fantasy and stuff and like weird
Mhm.
abstract sort of silliness. Um, but I always just each project for me is different. I always try to sort of cater to, or not cater, but I try and sort of adapt whatever my skill set is or style or whatever you want to call it approach to whatever it is to kind of change things up to um, kind of suit whatever story I'm telling. And also, I
Mhm.
just get bored. Like I get bored with doing exactly the same thing over and over again, which might be a problem for a cartoonist when you have to draw things over and over and over again. Um, but yeah, I usually try and just like keep it exciting for me at least, and hopefully that sort of translates over to each project. But yeah, Monkey Chef, it's like got some similar things to Woods and like textures I was using, or maybe some storytelling elements. But uh, for Woods, I was going like real dark. I wanted things to be kind of like messy
Mhm.
in areas. I wanted there to be a lot of chaos in the artwork and also parts of the storytelling. Whereas Monkey Chef was like pretty like linear storytelling, maybe a few fantastical elements, but not too much, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and my third book, which has a naughty name, I guess I'll say it if you want to bleep it or whatever. It's called Go Fuck Myself. The Fuckpendium is like the collected sort of volume of all of it. It's like 3 issues. Um, that one's kind of like very id. It's very like all jokes and like short stories and all these different timelines sort of running together. And it's more of like the sandbox of storytelling for me, where it's just like I got an idea. Let's see if I can figure it out and make it funny, and then also sort of mix short stories into one another to see if I can sort of have it coalesce into like a bigger, weirder narrative. I feel like I'm getting off topic or I'm not
No,
answering your
no,
question. I'm
you
kind
are absolutely fine. The
of
question was pretty open. It was about process and inspiration, so that's right on target.
yeah. I mean, inspiration wise, I mean it can come from anywhere. I have you know probably like 100 plus sort of notes on my phone, and a lot of those turn into stories or short stories. And um, yeah, usually if I think of something or see something or I hear something, and then usually it's about sort of depending on who you are. For me, it's like I kind of take it in and then I kind of run with it in my head, right?
Mhm.
There's this sort of like my head's sort of always coming up with stories, right? And in the back of my head, there's always something going on. There's always some sort of like weird narrative. So if an idea gets stuck and then I like develop it well enough, I'll write it down. And then sometimes I'll come back to it. Or sometimes it's terrible and I look back on it and I'm like, what does that mean? Why would I even write that down? But yeah, that's where some things come from for me. It's just like, I'll be on the subway or something and hear something or see something, and it usually ends up kind of sparking something. And if it's any way like 10% decent, I'll usually write it down and kind of just see if I can take it anywhere. Um, Sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a particular question that you're currently thinking about, currently exploring, or a particular kind of story that you'd like to tell next?
I've been pitching books for like a YA audience, which I'm kind of trying to move into, and there's one that's is being sent out to like editors and stuff right now. It's called Punkbert and the Ghouls, and
Nice.
it's just about this kid who kind of gets powers where he can make his drawings come alive, and uh, it's very spooky and Halloweenish, which I'm a big fan of. And um, he actually there's this like very televangelist preacher in the town that like runs a mega church and can control people, and it's like those two kind of squaring off against each other, because the main character Clem realizes that he can use his drawings to like free people from that control. So
Nice,
for
nice.
me, it's very much like, um, I mean that one like thematically or concept wise, it's like, okay, you're using creativity to free people from some sort of control. So
Hmm,
just
hmm.
sort of running with that, and then adding a bunch of fun stuff in, like monsters that he draws, and um, he's got a bunch of kooky weirdo friends in this small town called Moon City, um, and he's it's just fun to like kind of plan dialogue around that and just these people interacting. Um, but yeah, the main thing is kind of like, oh, it's this creativity versus this control, and how do you free yourself, or how does some power inside you free other people and yourself?
Hmm,
Um,
hmm.
yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool. I would love to see that.
Thanks.
And yeah, love the power of the imagination and the possibility of critical thinking and what that could do.
Right. Instead of just kind of going along with whatever is put in front of you, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, which is it's a must, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any particular forms, types of artistic technique that you're currently thinking about trying?
Ooh, that's a good question. Not really. I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of stuck in what I already do, which is like, if I do something on paper still, it's usually like I'm painting or I'm kind of doing something more
Hmm,
abstract, and that scratches a different itch than comics, which for me are like, I plan them pretty meticulously, so it's a very different thing to like plan a whole thing and then just kind of show up and do something on paper with like watercolor or ink or colored ink or whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean, all of my comics so far that have been, not all of them, but the three books I've done, they've all been digital. So I mean,
hmm,
I've been
hmm.
making all of them digital just because it's way easier for me to like work that way and not lose my mind. Which I would love to work on paper, but it's like I'm kind of too anal retentive about certain things. It's just so much easier to do it on like an iPad Pro or whatever. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. That makes me feel like I should be trying something
No,
new.
no, just curious, just curious. I love the painting medium. It's there's a changeability to it. There's a fluidity to it. I also feel like when I try to paint, there's not as much control. So I'm always in admiration of people who use it, and especially to tell stories and to lay in detail. It's a very cool thing to see people do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one thing I would maybe like to do one day, is like a fully painted comic on paper, but man, it would take so long.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now you have a website that is out there, so I want to make sure that we mention that so that folks can go and check out the work that you've done. Any particular spaces online, in person, or anything like that where people can go and check out Woods and your other books?
So I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's just first name, last name. if people want to follow me on there. I'm not super active right now. Instagram's kind of weird, but um, yeah, I mean, there's the places that have published my work, like Kilgore Books, and then there's Birdcage Bottom Books, which published Woods. Um, and yeah, at the moment, like if you ever want to buy anything, it's usually just through my website or whatever. And you know, a lot of the stories are free too. Like there's a lot of like samples or whatever, and some of it's just like free on my website for people to read. If you want to send me money, that's cool. I'll definitely send you a book and also take your money. But yeah, for the most part, website or like going to the publisher's sites and giving them money instead of Amazon is a cool idea most of the time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Anything that we missed in the talk through that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I really appreciate you having me. It's always fun to talk about comics.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I appreciate what you're doing in comics and how you're using the medium to explore. And the YA middle grade space is such a school. It is a school space, but I was going to say a cool space because as I mentioned, I'm a teacher and I've worked with middle grades, high school, and beyond. So really curious to see what comes about with your work for that age group and type of creating as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it too because it's kind of like there's different rules for it, you know, and I'm like trying to still be myself but adapt to those sort of those rules. So
Yeah.
it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, Mike, thank you for the time. Always glad to have you back anytime as your projects are coming along. If you want to continue the conversation, glad to do that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.